The reason we made a statement is because we believe that FENSA is symbolic of a bigger issue, a more fundamental issue in the WHO, which is its donor dependence. Because since a couple of years there has been a freeze on the assessments or the contributions made by member states, which makes that the program that the WHO wants to engage in is very dependent on voluntary contributions. The WHO has to rely on non-state actors, which can be NGOs, but also the private sector. And of course, it's the specific aspect that we are a bit concerned about, because we are afraid that FENSA, or the framework, is actually a process to legitimize a practice that is already happening. Like we have seen already how the sugar industry tries to influence the nutrition guidelines of the WHO on like your daily sugar amount you can have, which is of course very contradictory to the principles of the WHO that stands for the right to health for all. So what we want to stress is that this framework, or FENSA, has to be a strong protection, has to have strong safeguards against this undue influence of corporate entities, and that's why we made a statement about it.
My today's statement was about the Ebola crisis and the failure of WHO to effectively act against this outbreak. So the idea was to stress the importance of the lack of funds of WHO, the dependence of WHO on donors and on rich states, and that contribute to the failure of the effectiveness and the preparedness of WHO for emergencies. I address the situation of the current R&D system, which failed to address the effective needs. So I made a proposal to negotiate an R&D treaty, which could address the funding and to direct such funding according to needs rather than corporate profit. One of the objectives of WHO is to strengthen the health systems of the countries. We address this issue in order to encourage WHO to further work on this issue, which is fundamental.
The position of People Health Movement about the topic substandard, spurious, falsely labeled, falsified, counterfeit medical products is pretty much always the same. In fact, this topic has brought to the attention of the delegates very often, and our point of view is that there is a confusion about the terms. In fact, substandard, spurious, falsely labeled, and falsified products have to deal with a health problem, and counterfeit has to deal with property rights. So it's dangerous to conflate everything all together, because it could be that there will be also generic medicines that have nothing to do with the quality, but just with the property rights. These generic medicines could be also taken as counterfeit, and this would reduce the access to medicines for the low and the middle income countries.
We were discussing about the global plan of action on violence, particularly on women and the children. We mentioned that we like it generally. The report was very good, comprehensive, and definitely was clear in mentioning the role of the member states and the international organizations and the secretary in how they're gonna fight the violence and the role of each one of them. But actually it did not mention clearly some points, so it did not say about who are particularly the vulnerable population that face discrimination or stigma. They did not say about how they're gonna fight the violence against religion or sexual orientation or race discrimination. They did not mention about violence against LGBTs. They did not also mention patriarchy. It did not also mention emotional violence and its effect on mental health. We also highlighted that the health services itself and other services is a place of violence and abuse and discrimination. So we need monitoring and accountabilities for these places to ensure the safety for patients and health workers.
The major issue that we're raising on non-communicable diseases has to do with the issue of trade and its impact on health. Generally, the Global Action Plan's provision has to include in it assessment tools for looking at the impact of trade on health. Of course, also the provisions that are being made by the investor-state dispute settlement are also very important issues that tend to affect probably weaker countries in making stronger decisions that addresses the health challenges as far as NCDs are concerned. The other issue has to do with the global coordinating mechanism, and questions have been raised as to its constituents and the criteria for inclusion of members and taking into consideration members' views. Lastly, also the issues that has to do with the intellectual property protocols that addresses the key issues in terms of research and availability of information to address this global crisis.
The position of PHM about this topic is pretty clear, and it's a kind of announce of the probable conflict of interest between WHO and the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, FIA. In fact, WHO has a partnership with the foundation of FIA that have pretty much different aims compared with WHO. In fact, FIA wants more cars, maybe safer cars, but more cars, while it's proved and scientifically proved that the motorization causes more road injuries and more road access.
The main recommendation of the CEWG report was this R&D agreement, which would be a legally binding framework that would mean the commitment of each member state of 0.01% of their GDP into a pooled fund that would be used to finance research and development for health needs of developing countries. And the priority areas that it would tackle are those identified by the observatory. And it would do so by means of the linkage and open access approaches to make sure that the outcomes of this research is actually accessible and affordable to people. This R&D agreement was really put towards the side, especially in the open-ended meeting that they already had in 2012. And they are meant to discuss it, this new open-ended meeting that has to happen before the World Health Assembly, World Health Assembly 69. But it's not even put in the provisional agenda that the Secretariat provided. And the main thing we said here is please include that in the provisional agenda.
We made a statement because we think that the document lacks a lot of aspects. Like, firstly, we wanted to address that the health effects of air pollution are closely linked to matters of inequality, like access to clean energy or access to good housing or clean environment to live in. And this wasn't in the document in front of us. The Secretariat also have to address trade rules and economical determinants of air pollution. And this is really problematic. So this is what we really want to say to WHO, that they have to stress that governments have to be protected from corporate intimidation against regulations that they want to put forward. This is really a pathway that they have to focus on much more than they are doing right now.